move on because there's more Tri Nations Rugby to preview because we're looking ahead to this weekend's game. It is Argentina versus Australia. Now I know, granted, it is in Australia, the whole tournament's taking place in Australia, but this is Argentina's home fixture against them.
Yes, allegedly so. It is to take place this coming Saturday. It's morning time here in Dublin for us. It's going to be at 8:45 a.m.
Lovely.
Which is much better than the 6 a.m. we were treated to last week.
We'll be grateful for it.
That's actually a quarter to 8 p.m. local time, so it's an evening game out in Australia.
Yeah.
This is at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle City in New South Wales, which is just north of Sydney.
Right. Yeah.
Referees to be Paul Williams.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And the weather conditions actually are set for it to be absolutely lovely.
It sounds nice, doesn't it?
As summer approaches in Australia, it's going to be some light winds, but 21 degrees Celsius and sunny. So I think both sides are going to be delighted with that. This is a pure rugby match between teams who want to run and be physical. I
want to try and make a run at some silverware for the first time in God knows how long. They're both in with a shout. That's just one of the flavours to this game. I mean, the tournament itself has just been blown wide open by what the Pumas did last weekend.
Yeah.
Like, really, the All Blacks were, prior to that game, thinking they were just kind of coast with their bonus point scenario to another rugby championship.
And now they have 2 losses in their first 2 weeks of the tournament. Is that right? Or no, they've played 3 games now, so they've got 1 win and 2 losses.
That's right. A losing record for the All Blacks in this tournament. That's an unusual place to be in.
How often do you get 2 teams playing each other whose previous encounter was a win over the All Blacks?
Yes, I can't remember that ever happening. They're both coming in fresh from beating the All Blacks and facing each other.
It's a serious game, and both will be just ecstatic at the prospect of winning some silverware. You forget, obviously, with the Pumas outshining everything, just how confident the Wallabies are looking, how good that win was for their morale, how they're starting to figure things out under Dave Rennie.
100%, yeah.
One of the funny historical things is that the Tri Nations was disbanded after 2011, and so the Wallabies have liked to claim anyway that they're reigning Tri Nations champions.
Yes, because they won it
They won it in 2011, and then it's been the 4 nations since then. So now the Tri Nations has come back, and they have an opportunity to secure it again for perhaps the next forever, you know. So that's definitely a fun one as well. And obviously the Pumas have never won the tournament. They've never won serious major silverware.
That's true. Even the Jaguares the year prior got close, agonisingly close to the Super Rugby, but came second in the end.
Yeah, and yet they've never looked in better shape. I mean, the evidence of that first game, I mean, obviously a lot of passion, a lot of energy went into that game, and the questions do linger about how well and how easily that can be maintained over a 4-week period, and what kind of depth they have in their squad group, because, you know, you looked in the stands and there was a whole host of players who were in that squad camp who presumably might have to be given some chance over the next 4 weeks.
Well, considering you can't ask someone to do 4 weeks in a row.
Well, certainly you can't ask like Kramer and Matera to make 25 tackles 4 tests in a row. It's going to be very, very difficult for them. So the depth of the squad is going to come into it in terms of winning the game. But you could argue they've never been better placed to claim some silverware.
It's probably true. Yeah, like a win over the All Blacks will put you in better shape than you've ever been before, considering they hadn't done it. So it's just a very, very exciting occasion for both teams, and I expect both of them to just be absolutely bulling for each other on the very opening whistle. And considering the attitude both of these teams like to play with, they like to throw the ball around, couple that with the weather conditions, the locale, it's all set for just a really exciting game of footy.
Absolutely, yeah. You'd be buzzing for it. In terms of the squads for this game, obviously we haven't had any announced. Actually, we might have some announced by the end of the show if we're lucky, so we'll scout around before we finish up and maybe come back. But what we do know is that James O'Connor is still out for the Wallabies.
Yes.
So it seems likely that Reece Hodge will maintain his positions, filling in there for.
Try that, another chance for Lolesio, possible.
I would suspect. I would be very I think Reece Hodge should be playing anyway.
Yeah.
And then the question is what you do in the centres, whether you stick with Paisami and Pataya, or whether you bring Irai Simoni back in there or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That would be my frame of mind. You could conceivably do Lolesio at 10 and Hodge at 12.
So definitely an option. They do have options. They might have, considering he's just fresh off a wonderful performance and beating the All Blacks, then why would you change that, to be honest?
The other interesting dynamic is that a star of the NRL, who admittedly I haven't seen, but apparently there's quite a bit of hype about, this guy who's been playing in National Rugby League in Australia, Suliasi Vunivalu, who I must have Fijian origin, he's been added to the Wallabies squad, although I would say he seems unlikely to edge out Tom Wright and Corabetti after that performance against the All
Probably,
Blacks.
yeah, and you still have Daragh as well in the auxiliary wings, so they do have options there for sure. And do I see one other bit of squad thing? Obviously, Lachlan Swinton, fresh off his red card offence,
he's done for the year.
He's done for the year, so they will have to figure out something else to do with that jersey.
Yeah, I would say EC Naisarani had a couple of tries against Argentina for Australia A, and if you looked, for Australia A against Argentina, yeah, that's right. He was picking off the base of the scrum for a couple of them. He was gaining yards. He was playing at number 8, obviously, in that game. But one wonders whether he could slot in. If you could even move Wilson to 6 or him to 6, sure. Either way, I think that'd be a decent shout.
They may end up going with Ned Hannigan though,
or Liam Wright, and then maybe Naisarani on the bench. I mean, they definitely have options there. Yeah. Ned Hannigan was doing media, so he might be in the squad, or in the starting berth. But I would like to see them persist with Simmons and Phillip
in the second row for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead. We were just going to pivot on to Argentina's defence, I guess.
Argentina's attack.
Argentina's attack, I should say. Yes, we start with how they want to go about moving the ball.
Positively. I suppose. But we're going to look at the match first of all from Argentina's point of view. They are allegedly the home side.
Yes, indeed.
And starting with how do they want to break this Wallaby defence down?
Yeah, well, it's a tough ask considering the Wallabies have been fronting up pretty consistently. I think things start with Cubelli and Sanchez as they did before. Like those guys are going to have to pull the strings. They're going to have to bring a pretty aggressive kicking game to try and, like as we said, there are a few debutants on the wings or near debutants for the Wallabies as well. So they do want to test that backfield coverage for sure, especially if Sanchez is stroking it well. But for me, the big question is just in the contact area: are they going to bring the same heft and just will?
Yeah, it wasn't. There was no rocket science to last week's performance. They have good offensive instincts. They play with a lot of flow, but they were all about linking up with one another and winning their battles. So can the likes of Guido Petty, they arguably have more physicality on last week's showing than the Wallabies have brought all year.
Yeah.
And when the Wallabies have struggled in the Bledisloe tests is when they've kind of been blown away physically.
Yes.
So there's definitely a case to be made for getting Petty on the ball, getting Kramer on the ball, getting these guys
Bruni and
even Montoya.
Yeah.
Latching off each other and getting good go forward ball, and from there they're very good at developing a nice flow.
Yes.
They're very good at moving defenders around. One thing that the All Blacks didn't really do is really put a squeeze on their defence in the centres.
No.
I mean, Australia have been chopping and changing their centres. They've had, on numerous occasions, they've had Paisami and Pataya together, 2 out-and-out 13s, neither of whom is really a big hitter.
Yeah.
One wonders if Argentina, with a bit of flow and a bit of creativity, they've got Chocobaras in there, a lovely bit of footwork on him, lovely passer of a ball.
He's kind of a hard carrier as well. He's a hard tackler and a hard carrier, and Orlando is a lovely silky player.
Orlando has always cut a nice line as long as he's played for them, so I would love to see them probing in that area. And then obviously, as you say, the glorious flowy distribution game of Sanchez that you would hope to see on the same kilter, where he's just reading the defence constantly. If it flies up, he's putting kicks in behind, he's seeing the space, he very much is the guiding light. Cubelli driving a nice tempo and Sanchez being the general and dictating the flow of the game and how Argentina are approaching it.
Yeah.
Because if they can probe and get outside those centres, they have absolutely lethal guys in the wing.
They do.
Regardless of, I think Carreras might be gone, but Imhoff and Santiago Cordero and Delgui, all brilliant players with real the decent records in this competition as well against these teams scoring tries.
Yeah, they do. It can tend to operate a little wider these games. Just historically, the Pumas and the Wallabies both like to fling the ball out there, so I expect a bit more opportunity for those wingers and that back three unit as a whole than they saw against the All Blacks, because credit where it's due, the All Blacks did a good job of shutting down the outside a little, so it became about Sanchez kind of probing in different areas and the centres fronting up and winning their carries when they were forced to. But this time they may have a chance to get
there's more opportunity. I mean, they put 50 on Australia A. They'll be very confident about their ability to move them around, get their classy offensive players on the ball and really ask questions of the defence. And if there's missed tackles from Australia, they're really good. Argentina are really good at offloading and running great tracking lines and turning line breaks into points. And
yes,
definitely
they do transition well, and they identify space very well. So it'll be on them to read that and read that opportunity and be there to take it. But again, the key one is just, are they winning those collisions in the same way with the same ferocity? Are they bringing the same pitch to this battle? Because if they do, I suspect you're probably right. They probably do have a little bit more heft to them than this Wallaby side. So I hope to see them get on top of them, and then create their offense thereafter. That's
absolutely. Well, one of the areas that really was the hallmark of the Pumas last week, I should say, was on defence. Marcus Kramer, like we went through all these guys, but Kramer up there in particular,
made so many tackles, to be fair to him.
And then Pablo Matera on the jackal, constantly in there, constantly annoying. They brought such an intensity and such a physicality and a dominance to the contact area that it shocked the All Blacks. And the Australians, as good as they are in many areas, probably not as tough as the All Blacks in those areas. So they will, like, if they can bring a fight when the Wallabies have the ball and stop them at source, that could be massive for them. And then, like, getting on top of the Wallabies in the narrow channels and forcing them to kick is very much a nice picture.
If they can kind of slow their ruck down and remove the options for Nick White, especially, because White has had to, like, with the absence of James O'Connor, it's had to come a bit more off 9, even with Hodge doing his best at 10. He's not now 10, so Nick White becomes kind of their petit general mould of things. So disrupting that guy is obviously pivotal. And then a big job again for the centres. I'm just going to highlight them because Chocobaras did brilliantly on debut, but we did highlight that the All Blacks, despite being the All Blacks, didn't really test them in the midfield. They didn't really run any of those probing lines, and to credit where it's due, Dave Rennie's Wallabies have sat a little deeper than the All Blacks in the first few tests, and tended to go a little wider a little sooner. So certainly if you have a young guy who's maybe over eager in Chocobaras shooting and fracturing from his line, I think the Wallabies will spot that space. So it's kind of a big job for him to rein that in between Sanchez and Orlando leadership role, and maybe shooting might not be as effective as just kind of staying cohesive.
And keeping their width and forcing owning those contacts on the inside allows them to keep width and forces the Wallabies to earn the right to go wide, which is where it gets difficult for them. But you're right, the Wallabies in overall in Bledisloe, you could argue were perhaps more creative, and they were played at a quicker tempo and went wider, and certainly when Nick White was able to stamp his authority on the game, there was a lovely flow to their attack. They were, as you say, sitting deeper, moving the ball. White was getting to breakdowns and shifting it very quickly, and they managed to work their way around the size of the All Blacks with a bit of speed. Now that's obviously they at times can get a little lethargic on their ball placement, and they can get over the gain line and leave an opportunity there to steal some ball. Tuamafasi, I remember having a field day for the All Blacks. Argentina were so good last week at that. That's definitely going to be an area they go at again. But they do have to be concerned about the wide game. I mean, the Wallabies have a lot of runners in the wide channels who are actually really, really smart operators and are surprisingly good in the contact. Like a battle between Orlando and Pataya is potentially dangerous.
Pretty pivotal. I think Orlando has a huge job, a bigger job than he had last week in this instance, because Pataya is kind of their key distributing force at 13 in to the wide access channels, wide channel. So his telepathy with his back three, like bringing the wingers up or not, that'll all kind of fall at Orlando's door, as it often does with the 13 on D, because the back three will have to be aware that the Wallabies do kick a lot of ball. We've been annoyed at the Wallabies for kicking a lot of balls, so they will have to mind their backfield. But identifying the times when Orlando is maybe a little short-sighted, it'll be a big leadership role for all of them, because they will test them out wide. So
and they're also like, the dominant contacts that Argentina made were very impressive, but they were in the areas that the All Blacks were trying to play. Like it's perhaps not going to be Pablo Matera out there trying to tackle Corey Betty. It's going to be Del Guy and how he does on defence and how they do in their tackle completion rate as well, and making sure that they keep the discipline up that the back row and the forwards are bringing is going to be massive.
Still
because Australia are they're going to ask different questions.
Yes, they
so
are.
From a defensive point of view, being sharp in the tackle in those areas where there's more space and you have your less physical guys out there, that's a real test for them, and that's definitely one of the big question marks ahead of this. Are they going to be softer in the wide channels than they were in the tight, where the All Blacks went after them?
This is true. And also, will Sanchez be forced to make a load of tackles in his channel as well? I suspect the Wallabies might move their runners a little wider out, because Sanchez does tend to defend in the line. He's very courageous that way, but the system just has him in the line. So the Wallabies might send him down that channel. A little bit of savvy would put a back row forward there to just support him. Like, he'll probably make his tackle and then have a guy there to poach, be it Matera or not, to punish them for hitting. If you can teach them early that running at Sanchez is a turnover, that'll just, you don't want Sanchez taking multiple contacts.
Sanchez, historically speaking, I mean, there was one year where he was the top tackler in the Rugby Championship,
which is like impressive as a 10, but on a macro scale, why is your 10 making a load of tackles?
And the other factor obviously is just that he's a little older and he can't take as many contacts, like an old quarterback. When you're young and you're a rookie, you can do all this running into guys, but when you're getting on in age, you got to mind find yourself a bit more.
This is true.
And he's at his best when he's got all of himself present and he's not rattled and he's just able to control and see the game.
Exactly.
And boy, he was so good last week. If he can replicate that performance, it'll be a joy to watch. He looked like the best 10 in the world last week.
He did. So flowy, such a tempo and such control. I suppose we'll move out to where a real battle will happen is in the set piece. Yeah. Both of these sides have been impressive in the set piece thus far. The Wallabies have really upped their game at scrum time.
They have.
Really have. They've found some really quality tight heads and some good scrummagers.
And quality loose heads as well. Yeah. I think you really do have to give the shout out to James Slipper. I mean, his scrummaging has been nice and aggressive, and likewise on the Pumas side, Teta Shaparo as well.
Yeah.
The real factor is going to be which of the engine rooms is stronger, which is why you would really be looking for the Wallabies to keep the Simmons and Phillip combination going strong.
Yes.
And also how the tight heads hold up, because one would assume that the Wallabies are going to keep going with the holding off of Tupou to unleash him. Maybe not.
Possible they don't.
It's possible they mix it up and give him the start, especially against a Pumas team that likes to play with so much energy.
Yes.
It could be a very, very fortunate picture for the Wallabies if Tupou's getting on top of them.
Yeah, that seems ambitious to my estimation.
No, I think he's best unleashed from the bench.
I think so too.
And especially with a guy as solid as Alatoa. They might back
him
to lock down the scrum.
Certainly, I think it's key to pick Simmons. For one thing, because their scrum is so much better with 2 locks rather than 1.5.
Yes.
But when they have those 2 locks, then as you say, he's a really good tight head at just fundamentally locking the scrum down, which is all you'll want to do against a bullish offensive Puma side, who in the last game their starting front row were excellent but did play 70 minutes, all of them, which doesn't show.
They also scrum a bit maniacally, which is like it's lovely and flowy and dynamic, and everything the Pumas did was with energy and passion, but including their scrum, like the scrums were
pulsing a lot of the time.
Exactly, because like their Teta Shaparo and the whole Argentine front row is like shifting levels and jimmying at arms. And if the Wallabies can be solid, then all of a sudden, the chance comes in that the Pumas bring it down, or they slip, or they make a mistake, an unforced error. And if this is correctly refed by who do we say the ref was? Paul Williams. Well, he's not going to look at the scrum, is he?
This is the issue.
But no, you can get, like, if it's a very obvious picture where someone is jimmying the scrum and then goes to deck, it's like, well, clearly he's given away a penalty.
Exactly.
And that could be a factor if the Wallabies can lock down that scrum. So it's definitely going to be an area of intrigue.
Yeah, I think the Wallabies will be looking to try and lock it down and keep it parity for most of it. And then if you are springing a guy like Tupou off the bench, then maybe a few penalties come in the last quarter, and that could see you home. Because the Pumas have been very aggressive in that area, both traditionally the more aggressive scrummagers of the two nations, and I just think it'll be quite a dynamic battle. And then the line-out drive is key for both of them as well. I think the maul has been a useful asset for both. It's certainly a strike play that both of them go to in the 22.
I mean, the Pumas maul was sensational at the World Cup, and it doesn't look to have lost any of its importance and any of its flair. I mean, the Montoya tries, he was the top try scorer at the World Cup at some point, and they got a couple off against the All Blacks. I mean, with the pack weight of Australia, I should say, the sort of occasional slightness to them and the difficulties they've had on ball defence.
That's true.
I would imagine that that's going to be an area the Pumas go to.
Well, I think both of them might go on the offense. I think the Wallabies.
I haven't really seen much of it from the Wallabies.
Well, they tried a few in those tests against the All Blacks before they were stopped, and then kind of moved on to launching off it. But I think they will try it again with new opponents, because the Brumbies, as we have said, do have a legit maul. I think it'll be a lot of it will be more on maul defence for both teams. Are the Argentinians going to be aware to that threat and be ready to stop it?
It was the one area the All Blacks managed to make a play against them in the last day, and they did that with a quick play. They caught them off guard, and it was actually very sharply scored.
And to be honest, the Wallabies and Dave Rennie can be quick in those kinds of set piece. They can focus their mind and do a deceptive quick play. 100%. So maul defence will be huge for both of them. But then similarly in the midfield, when you're not mauling, both of these sides do like to get good clean ball off the top to get their backs moving forward, especially in the middle third. So it's very important. Obviously, both hookers will be looking to secure the ball. Wallabies had a few hiccups, but kind of remedied that.
You think Payangamosa is the solution?
He has been the solution thus far. Certainly in the first test, the darts were more worrying than they had been in the previous 3 or the following 3. And meanwhile, Montoya was just pretty perfect.
As he has been, he's just a phenomenal player. I mean, he's come in, backed up Cravey with just another excellent hooker. I mean, he's been really perhaps the unsung hero of Argentina, although he was sung when he was scoring those maul tries, but he's a really, really tidy operator.
Absolutely, and a good scrummager too. They do like to scrummage spearhead through their two in terms of the focus of the drive, and he can manage that. He's physical enough. And then just the final restart as well is the territory game starts with, or the final set piece I should say is the restart. Which kind of dictates. It doesn't decide anything, but it does give a slight edge in the territory game when one side can get on top.
Well, it's one of the things that the Wallabies should focus on, because the Pumas took a lot of 3-pointers, and they were able to exit pretty easy against the All Blacks. Like if the Wallabies should be thinking, let's make it difficult for the Pumas to rack up a score, even if they're edging battles. So obviously discipline's going to be important there, but if they can launch a very effective restart into the corner of the 22 and force the Pumas to kick under pressure, that really does stop them and stymie their ability to build a score with 3-pointers, because if they've only gotten 3 and then they can't really exit and get their hands on the ball, and Australia get to start the next offense, maybe they can even chalk the 3 off or add a try to it. So I think that's definitely a crucial dynamic that the All Blacks didn't get right, that the Wallabies might look at if the Pumas are going to give them a lot of chances to kick the ball off.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll just see how that plays out. But it is an interesting one to watch, particularly in the first quarter, I think, the restarts, because it gives you an insight into the tactics for both sides. But speaking of, we'll move on to the Wallabies then, the away team in theory. How are they going to attack the Pumas? And as we kind of alluded to earlier, depth and tempo is kind of the key here. Like maintaining their depth and spacing so that they have opportunities to get around them or through them. If you have a guy like Chocovaris fracturing the line by coming forward too keenly, putting runners into that space. But the tempo is going to start with the contact, but then kind of pivot through Nick White, who has been so key for them. He's been brilliant, to be honest, at dictating that tempo and getting them moving with verve and enthusiasm and purpose. So the Argentinians will be trying to upset that, but it's on the forwards to win their collisions, get quick ball, kind of reduce ruck speed and move the pill around. Yeah,
and I think definitely checking the Pumas line speed is going to be huge here. The Pumas kept their width and won tackles so well, so I think the kicking game of Hodge in particular is going to be absolutely massive here. Is he going to be putting bombs in the sky for them to chase? Is he going to be finding little bits of grass to kick it in behind? He's got a great boot on him, likewise Tom Banks. If they can work those guys into the line and just check the line speed that the Pumas are bringing, that's going to be huge.
Test their pendulum as well, because obviously with Carreras going off and Buffelli still not available, it was the one area
without a fullback. It was actually while Carreras was on the field, but it was the one time that the All Blacks really did get some purchase off, was a little kick in behind that Carreras didn't really deal with in the first half. So, and Aaron Smith actually had some success from some box kicks as well, although obviously from an All Black point of view you're like, why are you box kicking all the time?
Yes.
But he did have some success with them, and that might be an area that the Wallabies go to if the Pumas are bringing that pressure. But I think first and foremost, it's like we talked about with what the Pumas have to do to shut things down. Getting the ball into the hands of the likes of Pataya is going to be massive.
That's their focus.
Getting the ball to the wide channels, exciting guys like Wright and Corabetti need to be brought into the game, and just moving it away, holding your depth and moving it away from the big tough back row forwards and trying to win contacts against the smaller backs is going to be huge here.
And resourcing that when you do as well,
and bringing some shape. Though they bring more shape than the All Blacks. You know, they like to bring their blindside wingers off the wing. They like to run some screen plays. They run some very deceptive little, especially off first and second phase. They run some very deceptive little plays.
And little inside balls with two men hitting them,
having
and you picking the right
10
guy.
And wing, 10 wing and centre break to the blind side in one moment and trying to exploit them that way. Just being much more creative and showing a lot more variety than the All Blacks did to really ask proper questions in this defence, rather than just trying to hit up. I don't think they should be trying that at all.
No, really. I don't really think that's it's kind of earned the right to go narrow rather than the other way around, because the guys, you don't want to run into Petty all day because he'll tackle you all day. Similarly, Matera, Kramer, all of these guys are game for it. But what you do want to do, and what you want to see if you're a Wallaby fan, is the likes of Kramer or Matera shooting up, identifying who they think the runner is, and going to the other guy, and then just having them be a bit more hesitant the next phase when they want to make a proactive hit, but there's so much deception and speed and depth on the ball that they can't really come forward out of the line, and then they're a little on their heels, and that's when you can get that Wallaby tempo that has been so terrifying when they've got it right, even against the mighty All Blacks so thus far.
100%. They're very creative, and they definitely have tries out there to be scored against the Pumas. So this is why it's such an exciting game. It is very much. I think it's going to be an honest game played. It's going to be like a ding dong battle, and going to be about which offense gets more off, which defense gets on top.
Yeah.
From a defensive point of view for the Wallabies, it's definitely a tough job. I mean, the Pumas, full of energy, are going to be running at them and are going to be they move the ball so sharply. And if the Wallabies try and front up by flying out of the line, Sanchez is going to drop kicks in behind. He's going to try and find grass. He's going to probe.
Yeah.
It's definitely a tough ask for the Wallabies, but it's not a dissimilar equation to what they were looking at against the All Blacks in terms of the initial job being, don't let them get on top of you physically. Yeah. Don't give them yards.
Don't concede penalties at set piece. Try and shore all that stuff up and make your first up tackles. Yeah. If every 1 in 3 or 4 hits can be a dominant Wallaby hit on defence, that should be enough to disrupt the Pumas into kicking. That's what they're looking to try and do. They want to repel some of that. They certainly can't allow the Pumas' physicality to overwhelm them or surprise them, because we've seen in the tests that they lost to the All Blacks, some of it was just first up tackling that wasn't being made or wasn't being dominant, and that was where the seams started to appear. But once they did make that first up hit, their defensive cohesion was actually very good.
Yeah, held its width nicely, and that's something that you do have to focus on against the Pumas. You do have to hold your width the whole time. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. If they can not allow the Pumas to get good front foot ball, and then the other key is, like, in terms of how the Pumas managed to rack up their points last week, they put their opponents under pressure, and then their opponents gave away penalties. Yes. And that's something, the discipline of the Wallaby side is going to have to be massive here. Yeah. No flopping off the ball, no slowing it up, staying on side,
no crazy high tackles,
holding your width. Basics of the game without playing them into the game, and then the onus will be on the Pumas to try more and to really try and get on top.
And that's, like, to be honest, where Cheika had loads of success while he was the Wallaby coach against the Pumas, was in doing that, disrupting them and forcing them to go a little helter-skelter wide, and they picked off a lot of intercepts against a more panicked Puma side before. And they do have a good record against the Pumas, they really do. So they'll be looking to try and exert themselves on defence, and if they can manage to disrupt the Argentinian ball, you'll get to their halfback, maybe Kubeli, a bit more scrappy, a few looser passes, Sanchez not getting the service he was. That's the key to them getting on top and ultimately winning the game.
Yeah. In terms of predictions, do we have any? What are your thoughts here? This is obviously a colossal game.
Oh, it's huge. I really want to say the Pumas. I would love to see them do it. I would really love to see them go all the way. I'm wondering, the main if about this game is just, what are we going to see any lull or any dip off as far as intention and intent from the Pumas, and just energy levels, because they were so up for last week.
Likewise, are they going to be asked more questions? Are there going to be more questions asked of them by the Wallabies?
Yeah, also a question. We've seen it a lot as Irish fans. We've seen super passionate performances where every man plays out of his skin, and it's very tough the week after. Sometimes you do see a lull in that, and they can lose games easily the week after, and I'm familiar with that picture, and I don't want it to be the case. But the Wallabies,
it could very easily.
It could easily be. The Wallabies have had a week off. They've seen the game. They have tape now on the.
They have an opportunity to win the Tri Nations.
They do have that too,
and they're a very good team.
That's also true. So my head is kind of leaning Wallabies, where my heart is leaning Pumas. So I don't know who to side with in this instance. Where are you leaning?
Give me an answer.
I'll say the Pumas by 3. Pumas by 2 with a Sanchez drop goal in the 83rd minute.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they're very good, the Puma. On the evidence of last week, if they can deliver a performance like that, there's no reason why they can't get on top of this Wallabies team. Because I do feel still like if the Wallabies were to play an England, say, next week, they'd struggle. Yeah. They'd struggle with the variety of the game that the English bring, along with the physicality. When you match the physicality that they were struggling with real dynamism and creativity, they do struggle, and the Pumas definitely have a bit of that.
Yeah.
Whether they can really open them up, I think, especially with it being in Australia and the opportunity that's aboard them, you would suspect that the Wallabies will score tries as opposed to the try singular that the All Blacks scored, because they're more creative. They have a better offense than the All Blacks, as hard as that might be for a Kiwi fan to hear.
Yeah, it's true at the moment.
Yeah. So again, I think it's going to be perhaps close, but we'll say a 6-point win for the Wallabies. But I genuinely think that, like, a lot of this, as you say, is going to depend on what kind of Pumas rocks up, whether they bring the same energy. Yeah. And if they do, there's no reason why they can't go and win this game. It's very exciting for that reason.
But I would be deflated if I see a subdued and a slack Argentina, and then the Wallabies run in a load of tries. It could easily happen that the Wallabies win by 20. because the Pumas aren't
I really
quite
don't
out,
think so.
I hope not.
I really don't think so. Like it's possible, but I really don't think so. I think that the Pumas look a very, very good side, and when they put together a bit of momentum, like they have done in World Cups, and this is very much similar to that in terms of they're in one camp, there's no travel issues, and it's
no
very much like a World Cup campaign in that it's week on week and gets very important. And when they've done that in the past, they have been sensational right to the very last.
It's true.
So
I
think they will be good.
Yeah.
I think they'll be very good, and I wonder. Like I think it's going to be an excellent game. And then my prediction where the Wallabies win, the Wallabies will get them on the wide channels and steal the game. But it's going to be tight. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be high standard.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely one of the games of the weekend, and so exciting. And just these two teams in with a shout of winning it. What's not to love? Tri Nations really
is back,
up.
baby. What a competition!
Yeah, we love it. We love it.
Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.